The cathedral bells rang across downtown Manhattan as black luxury cars lined the street outside St. Augustine Cathedral. Inside, nearly 400 guests sat beneath crystal chandeliers and towering arrangements of white roses. It was the wedding everyone had been talking about. At the altar stood Ethan Carter, a 38-year-old billionaire whose name appeared on skyscrapers, hospitals, and technology companies across the country. He wore a perfectly tailored black tuxedo, but his expression was calm and restrained, almost as if he were attending a board meeting instead of his own wedding. Beside him stood Victoria Langford, the daughter of a powerful banking family. Her wedding gown had been designed in Paris and reportedly cost more than most people earned in 10 years. She smiled at the cameras positioned discreetly near the back of the cathedral. This was not only a marriage, it was the union of two empires. The officiant raised his hands, and the whispers faded. "Ethan Carter, do you take Victoria Langford to be your lawfully wedded wife?" Ethan looked at Victoria. For a brief moment, something unfamiliar passed through his eyes. Doubt, perhaps, or fear. But it vanished quickly. "I do." Victoria's smile widened. The officiant turned toward her. "Victoria Langford, do you take Ethan Carter to be your lawfully wedded husband?" She inhaled slowly. The cathedral doors suddenly opened. A cold gust of wind swept through the aisle, making the candles tremble. Every head turned. A little girl stood in the doorway. She could not have been older than 6. She was barefoot, her feet covered in dirt. Her flower dress was torn near the shoulder, and the once white fabric was stained gray. Her dark hair hung in tangled strands around her face. For several seconds, no one moved. Then 2 security guards rushed toward her. "Stop," one of them ordered. "You can't be in here." The girl's eyes searched the cathedral desperately. Then she saw Ethan. Her face changed instantly. "Daddy." The word echoed through the cathedral. Before the guards could reach her, she ran. Guests gasped as the barefoot child raced down the center aisle between rows of politicians, executives, celebrities, and reporters. Victoria slowly lowered her hand. Ethan remained frozen. The girl reached the altar, threw both arms around his waist, and buried her face against his tuxedo. "Daddy," she cried again. "You came back." A wave of whispers spread through the cathedral. "Is that his daughter? Did Victoria know?" Someone called the press. Camera shutters began clicking. Victoria stared at Ethan, her face drained of color. "Who is she?" she whispered. Ethan looked down at the child holding him. He had negotiated billion-dollar deals without fear. He had faced hostile boards, lawsuits, and public scandals. But now, standing before hundreds of guests, he looked completely lost. "I don't know," he said. The girl lifted her face. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You promised you wouldn't leave me again." Ethan's breathing changed. There was something about her voice, something about her eyes, a strange familiarity he could not explain. Security reached the altar. One guard grabbed the girl gently by the arm. "Come with us." "No," she screamed, tightening her grip on Ethan. "Don't take me away from my daddy." The cathedral erupted into chaos. Victoria stepped backward. "You don't know her?" she demanded. "I've never seen her before." "Then why is she calling you daddy?" "I don't know." A reporter moved closer, raising a microphone. "Mr. Carter, is this your secret daughter?" Ethan's jaw tightened. "Turn off the cameras." But it was too late. The scene had already been recorded. Within minutes, the video would be online. The girl was carried away, kicking and crying as she reached for Ethan. "Daddy, please." Her cries followed him even after the cathedral doors closed. The ceremony was suspended. Guests gathered in small groups, whispering excitedly. Victoria disappeared into a private room with her parents. Ethan remained at the altar, staring at the closed doors. 3 days earlier, his life had seemed perfectly controlled. Every morning, Ethan woke at 5. He exercised for 1 hour, reviewed financial reports over black coffee, and arrived at Carter Global before most employees had left home. He had built his company from nothing. As a child, Ethan had moved through 7 foster homes before turning 18. Some families ignored him. Others treated him like a paycheck. He learned early that relying on people only led to disappointment. By 25, he had created his first software company. By 30, he was a billionaire. The public saw him as cold, calculating, and almost impossible to understand. What no one knew was that Ethan secretly funded shelters and foster care programs across the state. Every Friday evening, he visited one of those shelters alone. No cameras, no assistants, no publicity. He brought books, food, clothing, and sometimes simply sat with children who had no one else to talk to. 1 month earlier, Ethan had visited a small homeless shelter in Brooklyn called Hope House. While speaking with the director, he noticed a little girl sitting alone near a window. She did not play with the others. She simply watched him. When Ethan smiled at her, she lowered her head. "What's her name?" he asked. "Lily," the director replied. "She doesn't speak much. Does she have family?" "None that we can find." Ethan had looked at the child again. For reasons he could not explain, the sight of her made his chest ache. Before leaving, he placed a small teddy bear on the chair beside her. Lily never said a word, but as Ethan walked toward the exit, she whispered something so softly that he believed he had imagined it. "Don't go." Oh. Now, standing inside the cathedral after the interrupted ceremony, Ethan remembered that moment. The tangled hair, the frightened eyes, the same little girl. His phone vibrated. Dozens of news alerts filled the screen. Billionaire's secret child crashes wedding. Homeless girl calls Ethan Carter daddy. Victoria Langford humiliated at altar. Ethan ignored them. He turned to his head of security. "Find out where they took her." "Sir, the police are questioning the shelter staff." "I didn't ask what the police were doing." The guard straightened. "Find her," Ethan repeated. "Now." As Ethan walked out of the cathedral, he could still hear the child's voice inside his head. "You came back." He did not know who she was. He did not know why she believed he was her father. But somewhere deep inside him, a fear began to grow. What if the little girl knew something about his past that he had spent 20 years trying to forget? The flashing lights outside St. Augustine Cathedral had not faded by the time Ethan's black sedan pulled away. Reporters chased the convoy, drones hovered overhead, and every major news channel interrupted its programming with the same headline: "Billionaire groom accused of hiding secret daughter." Inside the car, Ethan stared silently through the tinted window. His phone vibrated every few seconds. Board members, lawyers, investors, Victoria. He ignored every call. Only one question occupied his mind. Who was Lily? Across town, Victoria sat inside a private suite at the Langford Hotel with her parents. "You lied to us," her father said coldly over the speakerphone. "I didn't," Ethan replied. "A little girl doesn't run into a cathedral calling a stranger daddy. I've never seen her outside a shelter." Silence followed. Victoria finally spoke. "If you want this marriage to survive, find the truth before the world invents it." The line went dead. Within an hour, social media had turned the wedding into the biggest story in America. Millions of people debated whether Ethan had hidden a child for years or abandoned a family in secret. His company's stock dipped nearly 4% before the market closed. For the first time in years, none of it mattered. "Take me to Hope House," Ethan told his driver. The homeless shelter looked exactly as it had a month earlier. Old brick walls, a rusted playground, faded paint peeling from the entrance. Children played quietly in the yard while volunteers served dinner inside. As Ethan stepped out of the car, conversation stopped. The shelter director, Margaret Wilson, hurried toward him. "I expected you'd come." "Where is Lily?" Margaret hesitated. "She's been asking for you since yesterday." She led Ethan through a narrow hallway until they reached a small bedroom containing only 2 beds, a bookshelf, and a stuffed teddy bear resting beside the window. Lily sat on the floor drawing with broken crayons. When she looked up and saw Ethan, her entire face brightened. "You came back." She ran toward him again. This time, Ethan instinctively knelt before she reached him. She wrapped her small arms around his neck. "I knew you would." He gently hugged her back. "I'm here." Margaret quietly closed the door, giving them privacy. After a long moment, Ethan smiled softly. "My name is Ethan." "I know. Do you know yours?" "Lily. Can you tell me why you called me Daddy?" The little girl tilted her head as though the answer were obvious. "Because you are." Ethan's smile faded.
Who told you that?
"My mommy." His heartbeat quickened. "What was your mother's name?" Lily lowered her eyes. "I don't remember." "Do you remember where you lived?" She shook her head. "I only remember the fire." Margaret stepped closer. "She was found after an apartment building burned down nearly 2 years ago. She survived, but no relatives ever came forward. No birth certificate? Nothing. No father listed?" Margaret slowly shook her head. Every record disappeared in the fire. Ethan looked back at Lily. She seemed completely certain. Not confused. Not frightened.
Certain.
As Lily reached for her teddy bear, something slipped from beneath her sweater. A silver chain. At the end hung an old oval pendant, blackened with age. Ethan frowned. "May I see that?" Lily nodded. He carefully opened the tiny pendant. Inside was a faded photograph, no larger than a postage stamp. His breathing stopped. The picture showed a teenage boy standing beside a smiling girl beneath an old oak tree. The boy was unmistakably Ethan, nearly 20 years younger. His hair was longer. His clothes were worn. But it was him. Beside him stood Emily, the first girl he had ever loved. The girl he believed had died shortly after they aged out of foster care. His hands began to tremble. "Where did you get this?" "My mommy said never lose it." Margaret stared at the photograph. "You know these people?" Ethan couldn't answer. He hadn't seen Emily's face in almost 2 decades. Memories flooded back all at once. Summer afternoons by the river. Shared dreams of escaping poverty. A promise to build a better life together. Then one day, she vanished without a goodbye. Everyone told him she had died while traveling out of state. He mourned her for years before burying the pain beneath endless work. Now her photograph was resting inside the necklace of a homeless child who insisted he was her father. It couldn't be possible. Could it? As Ethan closed the pendant, something caught his attention. The hinge felt unusually thick, almost as if the necklace contained more than just a photograph. He looked closely. There was a tiny hidden compartment built into the back, one so carefully concealed that it was almost invisible. His fingers paused over the edge. Whatever was inside might explain everything, or destroy the life he thought he understood. Ethan stared at the tiny silver pendant as if it had become the center of the universe. His thumb rested against the hidden seam on the back. For a moment he hesitated. Then he carefully pressed the edge with his fingernail. A faint click echoed through the quiet room. The hidden compartment slowly opened. Folded inside was a tiny piece of paper, yellowed with age and protected by a thin layer of plastic. His hands trembled as he unfolded it. The handwriting was unmistakably Emily's. Elegant.
Neat.
Exactly as he remembered. The note contained only one sentence. "If you ever find her, tell Ethan I never stopped loving him." The room fell silent. Ethan read the sentence again. And again. Margaret looked at him with concern. "Who is Emily?" Ethan swallowed hard. "The only woman I ever wanted to marry." 20 years of carefully buried memories came rushing back. When they were 18, Ethan and Emily had grown up together in the same foster system. Neither of them had parents. Neither of them had money. But they had each other. They dreamed of renting a tiny apartment, finding honest jobs, and building the family neither of them had ever known. Then opportunity came unexpectedly. Ethan earned a scholarship to study software engineering several states away. Before leaving, he promised Emily he would return within a year. "I'll come back for you," he had told her beneath the old oak tree where the photograph had been taken. She smiled through tears. "I'll be waiting." It was the last time he ever saw her. A month later, the phone number she had given him stopped working. Letters were returned unopened. Former foster workers claimed Emily had left town. Months later, someone told Ethan she had died in a car accident. Heartbroken and unable to verify the story, he buried himself in work. Success became his way of surviving grief. Now everything he believed had been a lie. "Do you know anything else about Emily?" he asked Margaret. She slowly shook her head. "Only what little Lily remembers." Ethan looked at the child. "Lily, do you remember your mommy telling you anything about me?" The little girl thought quietly before answering. "She said you were kind." His eyes filled with emotion. "And she said you'd come if you knew where we were." Those words struck harder than any accusation. If Emily had spent years believing he had abandoned her, she had been wrong. And if Ethan had believed Emily had died, he had been wrong too. Someone had separated them. But who? The next morning, Ethan flew to the small Ohio town where he and Emily had spent their final months together. Most of the neighborhood had changed, but the old foster home still stood. The building was abandoned. Paint peeled from its walls. Windows were boarded shut. Across the street, however, an elderly woman recognized him immediately. "Ethan Carter?" He nodded. "I haven't seen you since you were a teenager." "My name is Mrs. Dawson, isn't it?" She smiled sadly. "You remember. I need to ask you about Emily." The woman's expression changed instantly. "I always wondered if you'd come back." "You knew her?" "I knew both of you." She invited Ethan inside her small house and opened a dusty cardboard box filled with newspaper clippings and photographs. "There was no car accident," she said quietly. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. "What do you mean?" "Emily disappeared because she was pregnant." His world seemed to stop. Mrs. Dawson continued. "She came to me crying one evening. She said she had written you dozens of letters, but none were answered. I never received a single one." "I believe you." She opened another envelope. Inside were several old letters, every one addressed to Ethan. None had ever been mailed. The director of the foster home found them. Ethan stared at the envelopes. "He told Emily you had moved on, and he told me she was dead." Mrs. Dawson nodded slowly. "He wanted both of you gone. He said caring for a pregnant teenager would damage the home's reputation." Anger rose inside Ethan, unlike anything he had ever felt. One man's lies had stolen 20 years. 20 years he could have spent with Emily. 20 years he could have spent raising Lily. What happened after she left? Mrs. Dawson lowered her eyes. Emily worked wherever she could, cleaning offices, waiting tables. She raised Lily alone. And the fire? It happened 2 years ago. She reached into the box one final time and handed Ethan a newspaper clipping. The headline read, "Single Mother Dies Saving Child from Apartment Fire." According to the article, Emily had carried Lily out of the burning building before collapsing inside. She never regained consciousness. Witnesses reported hearing her repeat one sentence over and over before the ambulance arrived. "Please find Ethan Carter." Tears rolled down Ethan's face. She had searched for him until her final breath, and he had never known. As he folded the newspaper carefully, his phone began ringing. It was his attorney. "Ethan, we have a problem." "What happened?" "Victoria has officially postponed the wedding." Ethan closed his eyes. "I understand." "That's not all. The media somehow discovered Emily's name. Reporters are calling her your abandoned girlfriend. Your board is demanding answers, and several investors are threatening to pull out." For the first time in years, Ethan didn't think about money. He didn't think about his company. He didn't think about public opinion. None of it mattered anymore. There was only one truth left to uncover. He looked at the old newspaper one last time before carefully placing it beside Emily's letters. Then he spoke the words he should have spoken 20 years earlier. "I'm coming home, Lily." And this time, he intended to stay forever. The DNA report arrived on a rainy Thursday morning. Ethan sat alone in his office, the envelope resting on the desk in front of him. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, the city moved as if nothing had changed. His attorney, Dr. Melissa Grant, placed the report beside him, without saying a word. "You don't have to open it alone," she said gently. Ethan nodded but remained silent. For nearly a minute, he simply stared at the envelope. Then he finally broke the seal. His eyes scanned the page until they reached the final line. Probability of paternity, 99.99%. He closed his eyes. Every question that had haunted him for days suddenly disappeared. Lily was his daughter. The little girl who had run into the cathedral. The child who had wrapped her arms around him. The little voice that had cried, "Daddy?" She had been telling the truth all along. A single tear rolled down Ethan's face. Not because he had lost something, because he had finally found it. The story dominated every news channel. The same reporters who had accused Ethan of abandoning a secret child now revealed the truth. Emily had never stopped searching for him. The letters had been hidden. The lies had kept them apart. The former director of the foster home became the target of a criminal investigation after several former residents came forward with similar stories of abuse, manipulation, and destroyed records. Public opinion changed almost overnight. Investors who had doubted Ethan apologized. His company's stock recovered. Television hosts called him a father robbed of 20 years. But Ethan ignored every interview request. He had something far more important to do. Later that afternoon, he walked into Hope House carrying no lawyers, no assistants, and no security. Only a small backpack. Lily looked up from the playroom. "Daddy." This time, Ethan smiled before she even reached him. He lifted her into his arms. "I have something to tell you." She wrapped her tiny hands around his neck. "What is it?" "I don't have to leave anymore." She looked into his eyes. "Really? Really?" Her smile was brighter than anything money could ever buy. Margaret watched quietly from the doorway, wiping away tears. "I've already signed the papers," Ethan said. "The adoption process?" He nodded. "I don't want another day to pass without her knowing she has a home." A month later, the adoption became official. The judge smiled warmly as Lily climbed onto Ethan's lap. "Miss Lily Carter," the judge announced, "you officially have a father." The courtroom erupted in applause. Lily looked at Ethan. "Does that mean I can stay forever?" He kissed her forehead. "It means you're exactly where you belong." Victoria requested one final meeting. They met in a quiet cafe overlooking Central Park. She looked exhausted. "I owe you an apology." "You don't owe me anything. I judged you before knowing the truth." "You reacted like anyone would have." She smiled sadly. "I thought I was losing a husband." Ethan looked down at his coffee. "I was discovering I had a daughter." Neither of them spoke for several moments. Finally, Victoria reached across the table. "I hope you find the happiness you were looking for." Ethan smiled politely. "I think I already have." They shook hands and walked away, each following a different path without resentment. Instead of spending millions on the honeymoon that never happened, Ethan invested every dollar into something Emily would have loved. The old homeless shelter where Lily had lived was completely rebuilt. The crumbling brick walls disappeared. Bright classrooms replaced broken rooms. A library filled with thousands of books stood where the storage shed once leaned. There were gardens, playgrounds, music rooms, art studios. Every child received healthcare, counseling, education, and a safe place to sleep. Above the entrance, carved into white stone, were 3 simple words: Emily Children's House. During the opening ceremony, no celebrities were invited. No politicians. No television interviews. Only children. Hundreds of them. Lily stood beside Ethan holding a pair of oversized silver scissors. "Ready?" he asked. She nodded enthusiastically. Together they cut the ribbon. The children cheered. Laughter echoed across the courtyard. For the first time in years, Ethan felt something that success had never given him: peace. That evening, after everyone had gone home, Ethan and Lily sat together beneath a large oak tree planted in the center of the garden. It reminded him of another tree, the one where he and Emily had dreamed about building a family. Lily leaned against his shoulder. "Do you think Mommy can see us?" Ethan looked toward the stars beginning to appear above them. "I think she never stopped watching." Lily smiled softly. "I miss her." "So do I." They sat quietly until Lily slipped her small hand into his. "Daddy." "Yes. I'm glad I found you." Ethan squeezed her hand gently. "No, sweetheart." He smiled through tears. "I'm the one who is lost." The wind moved softly through the leaves above them. For the first time in 20 years, Ethan no longer carried regret. He carried responsibility. He carried hope. Most of all, he carried the little girl who had unknowingly interrupted the most expensive wedding in the city. Only